Four Fed officials giving speeches this afternoon, two of them during this hour. But what good is all of the talk coming from the Fed if markets seem to be misinterpreting what is being said? We saw this happen, all shake out on Wednesday. Joining us now, before they duke it out for the All-Star Showdown, let's bring in NewOak Capital co-founder Jim Frischling and Oliver Portia, president of Gary Goldberg Financial Services. All right, Showdown's coming up later, but I'm curious, Jim, when you see all of us, and you included, had thought that there was going to be a taper. Do you have egg on your face, and do you start to kind of maybe reevaluate how you interpret what the Fed says when they say it initially?
Well, I think the Fed had done such a conscious effort to get the market ready, signaling tapering, talking about it so much. It was going on constantly, and then ultimately to simply look at some of the data and rely on that data. And I understand that, except for the fact that it was very, very misleading. I think the Fed's boxed themselves a little bit in the corner now, relying on certain figures at the expense of the overall picture.
Okay, so that's a good point that he's making, because that happened to everyone. I mean, there were just a few people that said they weren't going to taper, but for the most part, the markets thought it was happening.
Well, you know, having a couple of days to reflect on the news and what happened, and looking back at some of the announcements over the last few months, really since May, when the first talk of tapering started coming up, I look at it as the Fed was going through an exercise of a life case study, kind of like you would do in business school, to see how the markets would react. And what you've seen is a 100 basis point jump in interest rates in the 10-year, and rates rise in the mortgage market rapidly. And so they've decided not to taper. I think it's also important to look back, and Jimmy and I agree on this, that any tapering that was going to happen would have been relatively mild, you know, 10, 15 billion. Okay, so you're still purchasing $70 billion worth of bonds. It's not exactly taking a whole lot of stimulus away. So the short end of the story is that listen to what Ben Bernanke is saying. Ignore the other four Fed governors today that are noise and going to create volatility. And Ben Bernanke
Wait a minute,
is telling
but
you...
don't turn off your TV, folks. But anyway.
Well, no, I'm not saying turn off the TV or don't listen to the news. But what I'm saying is Ben Bernanke has been very consistent in his message about inflation and about unemployment and about the economy as a whole, and which is why we are very convinced that, putting aside short-term fluctuations and volatility and a little bit of a pullback, that the markets are going to reach new highs before the end of the year.
But Jim, it has created volatility. And that begs the question of whether or not this transparency plan is the right plan for the Fed. Maybe this isn't really working out. The more volatility we get, whether or not we're approaching a decision, and it's affecting the wallets, it's affecting trading, and sometimes that's not a good thing.
No, I do agree with Oliver about Chairman Bernanke, and again, he has talked about inflation, which is fairly benign, and he's focused on unemployment, which continues not to be at this targeted level. Right. But I do think the Fed missed an opportunity. I think Wall Street was ready for it. There was some reaction, and now I feel there is this uncertainty going on, and the market is addicted to stimulus. The markets are addicted, and this only reinforces now anything the Fed does, and actually they're sending out mixed signals again.
But isn't it time for rehab, Jim? It's
time for rehab. I'm telling you, I am worried about asset prices. I do think the risk on trade, and I agree with Oliver, I think I'm not going to fight the Fed. I do think we're going to grind higher, because the fact is now people think tapering is to be postponed, but the fact is this market is now so addicted, and this reinforces it.
Well, we've been addicted, Jimmy, and we've talked about all of us on.
We're all going to rehab together? Is that the... Okay, all right, I'm in.
And eventually it's going to hurt. There's no question about it, but it's going to take a little while before we get there. I also think it's very important, Cheryl, you talk about, you know, the Fed being transparent. And transparency and clarity are two very different things. And the Fed is making every effort to be transparent, but they're not very clear, right? So that's why you're seeing all the confusion. That's why you're seeing the added volatility. When we look into next week and the fourth quarter of the year, we're going to see more volatility for specifically the same reasons, because you're going to have Fed governors come out and Fed officials come up and say contradicting information.
We're going to get that during this hour, because you've got Bullard coming out, and he says, well, it was data dependent. I mean, this is why we made it. You know, told you so, kids. Esther George was the lone dissenter in all of this. I mean, she's the one that kind of stood her ground and said, no, we've got to taper something. It's got to start now. So we're going to get conflicting statements, Oliver, in the next, 20 minutes.
And we'll get them, well, not this weekend, but we'll get them on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and so on and so forth of next week. Yeah. Because that's what these politicians, and they are politicians, don't kid yourselves. I mean, they may be economists and may have several PhDs.
The Fed's political, Oliver? No.
Just a little bit.
All right. Well, guys, smile now, because guess what? You're coming back. All right, that is it for now. These two are going to be coming back for the next round, the semifinal round of the Showdown. Who will advance to the final championship round of the Fox Business All-Star Showdown? Who will say goodbye? We have the results. That's coming up in about 25 minutes from now. Our stall showdown. I can't even speak. All-Star Showdown. There we go. That's better. Competitors are back to battle it out for a spot in the championship round. There is more on the line than their reputations. The loser going to buy dinner and drinks at Duke's right here in Manhattan. Don't they look nice? They look nice together. Get the lobster, and then I'll be there. And they're back to duke it out. Oliver Portia, Jim Frischling. We're going to see whose picks perform best to rocket them into the championship round. Who will be saying goodbye? These guys next. It is the Fox Business All-Star Showdown. We are getting closer to crowning the winner of our ultimate stock picking competition. Today, the results are in for the second and final week of the semifinals. Oliver Portia from Gary Goldberg Financial Services and Jim Frischling of NewOak Capital made their picks back in late August. We have tracked them for a month. Time to see who's come out on top. And Oliver, first, you went big here, you went big, or so you said I'm going to either go big or go home. You basically started with Apple. This is your first pick today.
Yep.
Let's look at this. Okay. At the time, you said early September products, you're going to hate me in 2 seconds, early September product launches is going to boost the stock.
Yeah, so there was a little bit of a misfire there, although it's recovered nicely in the last few days. But look, you know, the bottom line with Apple is it continues to be an undervalued stock with a great dividend and a great story. But the sentiment is so negative, so obviously patience is very much part of the picture.
Stock's down 33% over the last year.
Yeah, but not in the last month. So don't do that to me.
All right, there's the 1 year.
So.
We'll stick with it there. All right, let's move on to Jim. Your first pick was Sealed Air. All right, and at the time you said this is a turnaround story. They got a lot of free cash flow, and you also said management. The management changes or why you like this company. So you sticking by it now?
We are. We like the CEO. We think he's going to generate shareholder value. We think he's highly incentivized to do so. We did talk about some of the headwinds they're facing with the European economies, but the fact is we like their R&D, we like their innovation, and again, I think the packaging industry in general is facing some challenges, but we still like it, and especially like this company.
You know, that's a stock that's actually up 88% over the last year, well above the S&P 500. We just showed a comparison. So year over year, that's a good one. And I know we're talking long term. All right, Oliver, again, big name. You picked a big name, and it was Visa. Which,
Yep.
by the way, now breaking news.
So Visa is a great company. It's a great way for investors to take exposure to the financials without having to take the risk from the JP Morgans and the other banks that, well, let's face it, there's probably more trouble ahead. The stock is up nicely. It had been way oversold, and we're definitely sticking with it. We think it's going to continue to do very well over the next 12 to 18 months.
What's going into the Dow? And also with Visa, I mean, at the time you said, yeah, that it had been oversold. And now you've got this news that it's going to be moving into the index. So that's great.
So that's very positive. Obviously, that's a lot of institutional
Do you wish
buying.
that it was moving into the index today?
Well,
Competition.
Yesterday probably would have been even better, but the stock's done well, and so I think in the last month it's up some 6.5%, 7%, something along that. So certainly beating the S&P. And
Jim, you nervous?
I will say, when Visa got added to the Dow, I did get a phone call from my father who said, you're in a little bit of trouble right now. But that's not the only reason it's up. But he did note that on me.
Your dad's watching Showdown?
He's watching the show.
My mom's
right now.
watching Showdown, too.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, let's go. All right, so Jim, here's your second pick. This was Exco Resources. And you said that at the time, this was a month ago, you said they've done 2 acquisitions, they're reducing debt. Stock's down about 0.5% over the last year, but...
Yeah, and we were liking it for the acquisitions that they got from Chesapeake, so we were betting on that, and now probably going to be hurt a little bit by it because BG Group passed on its right to buy over the course of the last month on its 50% stake in the Haynesville asset. And I think the stock really met some challenges with that, with BG basically saying there's better opportunities elsewhere. Exco has to fund that thing on its own, which they can, but that'll be a little bit of a drag.
Okay, and Oliver, yes or no on Exco? Do you agree or disagree before I?
It's not a name that we really follow. I definitely fall in the camp of investors aren't going to get compensated for taking high risk right now. So stick with the larger, well-known names. Thematically speaking, I think that holds.
You're still going with the go big, go home. All right, well, let's see if it worked. Let's find out. Let's see how these stocks fared since you both picked them and who's going to be moving on. Oliver's Apple pick, it was rotten. I'm so sorry I just said that. Down well over 5%. Jim's Sealed Air actually rose 2%. So those are the first two. Oliver's second pick was Visa. Man, it took off. It went higher, over 8%. And yes, it's going into the Dow, which broke in the last month. And then finally, Jim's last pick, Exco Resources, down over 5%. So here are their averages. Oliver up in total 1.5%. Jim, you're down over 1.5 points. The winner, our final competitor, Oliver Porsche, everybody. Congratulations, Oliver. Nice job.
Thank you.
Did you know you were going to win? Did you have a
Well, I didn't, but, you know, to go back to your Apple comment, we knew about the first 11 months of past performance, so the question is really about going forward. Look, you know, the problem with doing something over the course of a month, that's really speculating and trading. It's not investing. I think Jim and I both agree on this, and we talked about it on the show a month ago.
But it's still fun for us.
But it's
Anyway,
great to win, and I do look forward to my meal.
There was a meal, not just for the two of us, but for the Fox team, and that tab now comes my way.
Okay, so it's going to be dinner at Duke's. You're buying.
I'm buying.
All right. I'm bringing cameras.
And
Because you know I'm coming, right?
Well, you are the Fox team.
All right.
And I am rooting for Oliver the next round because I want to have lost to the champions. I'm
Well, thank you.
Well, Oliver, all right. You're going to be moving to the championship round. You're going to be battling Robert Luna. Just want you to know he's out in Phoenix, but you don't want to miss how this is all going to shake out. This is next Friday, Robert versus Oliver. There's the showdown title at stake, and also there is a trophy. Guys, thank you.
Thank you very much.